Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Well, if you love stamping and stenciling, you're going to enjoy today's video. I am sharing a very clean and simple and elegant card design that's perfect for mass producing in a variety of different colors. I added just a touch of dimension here, though you can easily keep it as a flat single layer card. With a fresh pink and green color combination, a minimal sentiment, and some playful splatters, let's take a closer look at the card that we created today. We are going to begin today's project with this absolutely gorgeous stamp and stencil combo set. Not only does it come with these two products, but it also has a coordinating die as well. Together, they are part of the Altenew's Craft Your Life project kit, which was the Flourishing Garden. Now, this is a beautifully designed kit. Inside, you get a stamp set, coordinating die, a layering stencil, and an embossing folder, all of which give you endless possibilities for creating unique floral cards. For the card we are working on today, I'll be focusing mainly on the stamp and stencil combo. Now, what's great about the stamp set is that along with that beautiful floral image, we have 28 different sentiments, everything from sweet everyday messages to more heartfelt notes. So you'll always have the perfect phrase to go for your cards. Now, if you pick the coordinating die, you'll find that it not only cuts out that entire floral cluster, but also the four big words. We have the just a note, big hugs, friend, and greetings. This can be paired with all of those little sub sentiments that you saw there on the stamp set. You could cut them out in little sentiment strips and create beautiful sentiments or arrangements on your card front. Then we have the six layering stencils that is included in the kit. These are absolutely brilliant for building up depth and dimension on your floral images, making it look beautifully shaded without requiring any advanced coloring techniques. Of course, if you prefer other coloring mediums, this set works beautifully with your alcohol markers, watercolors, or even colored pencils. For my project today, though, I'll be using the coordinating stencils since they allow me to get a clean, crisp, and polished finish with minimal effort while still looking very detailed and professional. It looks like I may have lost a bit of footage here, but what I did was stamped a portion of that large floral image onto a white cardstock panel measuring 4 by 5 and quarter inches, which is slightly smaller than a standard A2 size card base. I only stamped part of the floral cluster and intentionally left some blank space on the top left corner. That's where we'll be placing our sentiment. Now, for the sentiment, I chose the phrase, I will always be there for you from the Alluring Orchids stamp set. Before adding any color to the flowers, I went ahead and stamped the sentiment in that open space. Both the floral image and the sentiment were stamped with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and then heat embossed using clear embossing powder to give them a more crisp and raised finish. Now, to make sure that my sentiment is always perfectly aligned, I like to use my Simon's Stamp Grid Transparency Sheet. I first place my panel onto my Altenew stamp wheel and then I will have my grid transparency sheet. This is such a handy tool. It not only helps you stamp your sentiments in straight line, but it also divides your card front into quadrants. That makes it easier to position both the focal point image and the sentiment in a balanced way, giving your design a more polished look every time. Once I'm happy with the positioning of my sentiment, I bring down the door of my stamp wheel and pick it up. At this point, I can remove the grid transparency sheet and stamp the sentiment directly onto the card front. If you'd like to be extra certain about the placement, you can actually stamp over the transparency sheet before committing to the cardstock. This way, you know that your sentiment will be exactly where you want it. Now, since I will be heat embossing, I prep the area by dusting it with my anti-static powder tool. This helps prevent stray embossing powder from sticking where it shouldn't be. For stamping, I used my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigmenting perfect for embossing because it stays wet long enough for the embossing powder to adhere. Once I was done stamping, I then sprinkled on my Simon's Stamp Clear embossing powder and tapped off the excess and then heat set it with my heat gun. A little tip that I always like to follow is to let your heat gun get good and hot before bringing it to the paper. This helps the embossing powder melt quickly and evenly while reducing the chances of the cardstock warping. Now that we've got our sentiment and focal point image beautifully stamped and heat embossed, it's time for my favorite part, which is adding color to the stunning floral design. Now, coloring really brings these images to life, and today I'll be doing that with the stencils and some absolutely beautiful inks. Now, whenever I'm ink blending, I like to work on my magnetic glass surface by Glassport Studios. It's a total game changer because it comes with those strong magnets that hold your cardstock and stencil securely in place. This means no slipping, no shifting, and I can really focus on getting smooth and even blends. I'm starting with stencil layer number one. Now, this set includes six stencils in total, and that might sound a little intimidating at first, but trust me, it's actually very easy to work with. These stencils are numbered, and alignment points are very intuitive, so it doesn't take long to figure out how each one layers on top of the stamped image. Layer number one allows you to add the base color to all the open surfaces on the petals. Originally, I was planning on creating a warm, sunny palette with yellows and oranges for the flowers, but as I looked at the design, I decided to go with the pinks instead. I just felt like the softer yet vibrant pink tones would give the card a fresh, elegant look, especially paired with green leaves. Now, to keep my card panel clean while blending, I added a few post it notes along the edges of the stencil. This is such a simple trick, but it really saves you from accidentally brushing ink where you don't want it to. For my inks, I'm using the Simon's Stamp Positively Saturated Ink Collection. I began with the shade Sweets, which is this beautiful, delicate light pink. I blended that softly through stencil number one, covering all of the open floral areas. This shade acts as a base color and sets the tone for the entire bouquet. Because the stencils are clearly marked, it's easy to layer multiple shades to build depth. Once I had the first layer done, I moved on to stencil number two, where I added this shade Taffy. Now, this is much more vibrant, bold pink that really makes the petals pop. You'll start to see the flowers take shape as the layers build, and that's one of the most satisfying part of working with these layering stencils. Now, if you look closely at the stamp set, you'll notice there are actually two distinct flower types. Now, this gives you an option to mix and match the color palettes, maybe make one type pink and other yellow, or even experiment with completely different hues. But for this card, I wanted a more cohesive look, so I stuck with the pinks for all of my flowers. For the more detailed stencil layers, I reached out for my mini ink blending brushes. These are great for getting into those tighter areas and keeping the detail crisp. That said, if you only have larger blending brushes in your stash, don't worry, they work perfectly too. In fact, I'll also show you how I used my larger ink blending brush when working on the foliage to demonstrate how easy it can be even in smaller spaces. Speaking of foliage, once the flowers were finished, I shifted my focus to the leaves and flower centers. For those, I used two complementary shades from the same ink collection. We have Perfection, which is a lighter, fresher green, and Pine, which is a dark, rich green. Layering the two gives such a lovely depth to those leaves, and it creates that realistic shaded look without needing markers or any paints. I applied these with the larger ink blending brushes, and as you'll see, it works beautifully even in areas where the spaces are a bit tight. By the end of the stage, the card already starts to look dimensional and polished, all thanks to those layering stencil system. Now, it's such a fun process to see each step add a little more detail until the full bouquet comes together. And with that, our floral panel is complete. Just look at how gorgeous it turned out. The combination of the vibrant pinks against that bold, fresh green really makes the whole image pop. It's bright, elegant, and full of life, and it immediately gives your card front such a stunning focal point look. To add just a touch of detail, I bought in a brown shade of the Spectrum Noir alcohol marker and added a few tiny dots and dabs to the flower centers. This little step may seem minor, but it gives the flowers little extra dimension and a more natural finish, making them feel that much more realistic. At this point, the card could easily be considered finished. You could simply adhere the panel to a card base and call it done. But I decided to take it a step further and add a little bit of splatter detail. Because let's be honest, splatters always add so much more character to a card design. Now, since my sentiment is small and delicate, I didn't want any paint drops to accidentally cover the words. To protect it, I used a small sticky note to mask the sentiment area. Once that was covered, I placed the panel inside my splatter box to contain the mess and then added some random black watercolor splatters across the card front. I kept them light and scattered for this card, but you can definitely adjust the intensity to fit your style. Go heavier for a bold, artsy look, or lighter for a more subtle, delicate finish. The beauty of splatters is that there's no right or wrong way to do it, they always look fun and unique. When I was done, I carefully lifted the panel out of the box and set it aside to dry completely. It's important to let your watercolor splatters dry on their own to avoid smudging. Once dry, I gently peeled off that sticky note mask using a pair of reverse tweezers, which help avoid fingerprints or accidentally tearing the paper. At this stage, our card panel is ready to be mounted onto a card base, and we are left with a floral card that's clean, colorful, and full of little details that make it extra special. Once my panel was completely dry, I flipped it over and added foam tape to the back. I almost always like to include some kind of pop and dimension on my designs. It gives the design more presence and makes it feel finished. The only time I skip foam tape or dimension is when I'm intentionally creating a true single layer card, which for me doesn't happen very often. After adding the foam tape, I removed the backing and carefully adhered the panel onto a top folding white card base. That little bit of lift makes such a big difference. It frames the floral panel beautifully and adds such a polished look to our card. And with that, here's a look at our finished card. I absolutely love how this design came together. The bold, vibrant pinks paired with the rich greens create such a striking focal point. The heat embossed sentiment adds that touch of elegance, while the soft shading from the stencils gives the flowers so much depth and dimension without requiring hours of coloring. The little details like the alcohol marker dots in the flower centers and the playful watercolor splatters really bring the whole card to life. What I especially love about this project is how versatile this design is. You could recreate the same design in so many different color palettes, and because the stencil layers are so beginner friendly, this card is perfect for mass producing when you need a stack of handmade cards ready to go. I hope this project inspired you to pull out your stamps and stencils and give this technique a try. I will have all the supplies that I used here listed down in the description box below. Please note that all of these links will be affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.